Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rise to Your Peak podcast. I am here with my guest today, Allison Fahrenbach. Allison is an IFBB Pro figure competitor, online coach, and FDN-P. She has been coaching for over 18 years. And while she's worked with a wide variety of people from different backgrounds, she primarily specializes in women's health with a bit of a focus towards women's hormones and gut health. Allison, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Did I miss anything from that little excerpt?
No, but you gave me so much more grace and credit. I'm not an IFBB figure pro, although
Oh,
that would be freaking amazing.
I
Um,
apologize.
I'm a natural figure pro, so I went
Understood.
pro in the IPE. So yeah,
Understood.
not quite the clout that the IFBB has.
Well, don't worry. They're just paying for those for that label anyways.
Yeah,
It's
this
a
is true.
membership program more than an award system these days.
You could say the same of the NPC too, right? As long as
Yeah,
you pay them,
yeah,
they're all right with it.
exactly, exactly. Well, I'm really excited to have you on today. We've had some fun little chats, just kind of connecting and getting to know each other. We surround ourselves with very similar circles of people,
Yeah.
but we've only recently connected. So I'm super excited about today and getting to know you a little bit more and diving into some fun topics.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
so starting out, why don't you just give the listeners a tiny bit of background about, what led to you getting into functional medicine and becoming an FDNP? I feel like everyone in functional medicine has a story, like
I
there's
know.
something that drives that passion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for most of us too, it comes from personal experience, either having dealt with health issues on our own
Yeah.
or from trying to find answers
Yeah.
through conventional medical channels and being very unsuccessful.
Sure.
And I check both those boxes.
Yeah. Same.
So, obviously I'm a lifetime competitor. And so I started competing when I was 18. And I competed for 21 years, almost straight,
Wow.
and did 30 shows. Yeah.
Wow.
So you can imagine, like, I know you knowing what you know, you're sitting there going, oh, the dysfunction. Like, so yes, like I ran into, gut issues and hormone issues
Sure.
and these sort of, these just imbalances and dysfunction that aren't necessarily disease,
Yeah.
but they're still not health. And
Yeah. Of
so conventional medicine had no answer for me, couldn't
course.
help me, couldn't couldn't direct me. And so I directed myself.
Yeah.
I started having gut issues. Gut issues were probably the first signal to me. I started having those in 2012. And then I also had a lot of hormone imbalances. I lost my period for almost 12 years,
Wow.
which is an extremely long time.
There is.
I don't recommend it to anybody listening. Um, and I just started reading everything I could get my hands on, just myself, just
Yeah.
personally. So
Yeah.
my background, my bachelor's degree is in sports science, which with a minor in wellness. So I had always had the physiology side,
Yeah.
the exercise
Yeah.
side, that piece. And I had gotten really into nutrition from doing bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And I was already a coach,
Mm.
but I was primarily a coach who coached other competitors and
Yeah.
focused very strictly on nutrition and exercise,
Yeah.
right? I would not say that I was equipped, qualified, educated at all to help anybody with anything other than I can cut your calories, I can get you in really
Right.
great shape for a show, and I can, do your training.
Yeah.
Then as I started to dive into my own health issues, I was just fascinated,
Yeah.
like just incredibly fascinated. And I started to realize how connected the body is.
Yes.
And I started thinking about, digestion and absorption and how does that translate into performance and physique enhancement. And so
Yes.
I just got really into it. And so I went back to school.
Yeah.
Um, And so that's kind of where it went from there. Initially, I went to IIN, which is the Institute of Integrative Nutrition in New York.
Mhm.
And I did graduate from there. And then I went and I sat for my boards and I got board certified. But then I really wanted just a little bit more of the functional piece. And so
Yes.
that's why I went to FDN,
Yeah.
and went down that route.
Yeah.
But I mean, too, so much of it is just personal responsibility when it comes to education.
Yes.
So just constantly learning, reading,
Yeah.
and equipping yourself. But yeah, so it was my own health issues primarily. And then also recognizing, I think too, that a lot of the people that were coming to me
Yeah.
had the same stuff,
Of course. Yeah.
had the same issues.
Yeah.
And so in learning to take care of myself, I also was able to translate that into taking care of my clients.
Yeah.
So
We have extremely similar backstories in that regard. So I fully resonate with everything you just said.
yeah. And I'm
Um,
not somebody who has a bad taste in her mouth from bodybuilding. I absolutely adore bodybuilding. Like I
yeah.
love it. I just think a lot of people are, I don't want to know, not even say not aware,
Yeah.
but maybe that's the words I want to use, of just how not healthy it is
Sure.
and how proactive you have to be
Yeah.
in managing your health and doing the best that you can to keep things optimal, because the sport does have a deteriorating effect over time, whether you're
Yeah.
natural like me or not.
Yeah.
It has
Sure.
a deteriorating effect.
Yeah. And, we also have to think that I always try to separate bodybuilding from competitive bodybuilding. Hey, you want to go to the
Totally
gym,
different things. Yep.
grow your pecs, grow your glutes, have at it. But competitive bodybuilding is a whole nother realm where
Yeah.
you are truly pushing yourself to the brink in literally every capacity. And I consider competitive bodybuilding to be the extreme. Whereas, just physique recomposition, not so
Yeah.
much. You can change your physique healthy, but competitive bodybuilding is a whole new level of taxation on the body and risk. And I think everyone kind of needs to separate those and realize, like, if you want to be a football player, there's risks. If you want to be a competitive race car driver, there's a lot of risk. Competitive snowboarder, lots of risk. So each of these situations kind of have a risk to reward window. But where the confusion, in my opinion, comes in is we think good looking body equals good internal health. So there's like
Correct.
this confusion
Yeah.
where bodybuilding is like, well, he looks better, so he must be healthier. And it's like, well, actually, he's deteriorating inside and feels like he's
Yeah.
going to die.
Or that leanness
Yeah.
is a marker of health. That if you can
Yes.
see somebody's abs, or if somebody is really, really shredded, that's healthy, or that's even sustainable. When in actuality, and especially for women, carrying a little bit of body fat, and at least the majority of the time,
Yeah.
is really a healthy thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's not healthy, normal, or natural for you to walk around with glute striations year
Right.
round.
Right.
And trying to do so has a very detrimental, effect.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a great point too, because this can kind of go into a separate topic, but a very, very important topic for society. Over the past, 6 to 10 years, we've seen this huge argument around food quality and calories in versus calories out and macros and stuff like that. But the problem with the argument is some people are taking it as health advice, whereas the people giving this information is specifically talking weight loss. So, yes, in terms of weight loss, it's generally calories in, calories out based on metabolic adaptation. But that doesn't mean IIFYM eating donuts is healthy for you. And so people confuse weight loss with health.
Or even just they conflate weight loss with fat loss, and the two
Yes,
are not always synonymous. So
100%.
I always say the amount of calories you eat is going to determine your weight, but the type of calories you eat are going to determine the quality of that weight. So,
Nice.
and in all reality, and I know you see this too, I'm sure you see this too, the people that come to you with issues are not eating butternut squash and kale and
Yeah,
chicken. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like, so that's not what lands people in my inbox
yeah,
going, hey, like I can't, get control of my gut issues, or
yeah,
I'm going through menopause and I've got these horrible symptoms and there's a tire going on in my midsection. And I look at their diet and I'm like, well, this is part of the reason why. It's not that calories in, calories out isn't a piece of that puzzle,
right.
but calories in, calories out, just on its face, assumes a balanced hormonal environment.
Correct.
And who has that really? I mean, a
Yeah,
lot of people
correct.
don't necessarily have that.
Yeah,
And food quality impacts hormonal environment
yeah,
because food is literally information for your cells.
right,
It tells your cells to be sick, it tells your cells to be healthy.
right.
I mean, I have said to people, or to my clients anyway, you know, some of the hacks that I use in prep are as simple as no protein powders, no artificial sweeteners, no
No processing.
processed foods, right? Like just pulling those things out.
Yeah,
That's not to say that those foods are bad. It's to say that those foods aren't as conducive to creating a favorable muscle to fat ratio
yeah,
in my body.
yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem is we live in a society where we attach a great deal of emotionality to food. So
100%.
so if I say a chicken breast is healthier than a donut, somebody listening to me could hear chicken good,
Donut
donut
that.
bad.
Yeah,
I am good if I eat chicken and I am bad if I eat a donut. And in all reality, I'm not attaching morals to the food whatsoever.
right.
I'm speaking strictly as somebody who is a coach in the functional space and knows enough about nutritional science to know that, hey, I don't make the rules.
Right,
Chicken breast is more nutrient dense
right,
and a healthier for you option than a
right,
donut. That doesn't
right,
make it bad or good.
right.
It just makes it health promoting or not health promoting.
Yeah,
So, I 1000% agree with you that yes, when people come at me and they're like, it's all about calories in, calories out. If you're not losing weight, you're not in a deficit. And I'm like, well, that's part of it.
yeah,
That's a key part of it. But the
right,
other part of it is what's the gut doing? What are the
right,
hormones doing? And a
right.
lot of that is contingent on a foundation of, hey, how's your freaking diet? Like,
Totally.
is there quality of nutrition involved? Because if there's not, it's a really good place to start.
No, 100%. And we also know with refined sugars and ultra processed foods that there's there's differences in leptin and ghrelin. And so, especially in prep, you're already hungry all the time. Do you want to eat something that satiates you and provides you
Correct.
fuel and micronutrients and performance, or do you want something that might give you a little dopamine hit, but now you just want more and more and more, and it actually hasn't done anything beneficial for your
Correct.
body? And going on your same point, I hate the whole calories in, hormones argument. It's all of it. It's not like a
Yep. It's both.
singular thing. It's why are we trying to put things into a silo? It's the whole equation. And what the calories in, calories out people don't recognize is the definition of a metabolism is the communication between your brain and the glands that produce hormones. That's it, you know?
Yeah.
So we need those hormones. And we're not just talking sex hormones, thyroid hormones. We're talking the entire picture here.
The entire symphony. Yep.
Everything working in conjunction for the body to function and perform.
Yeah. And I love that you said not just sex hormones, because I think sometimes when we say hormones, people automatically their mind automatically goes to things like estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. And they forget that there's things like insulin and cortisol and leptin and ghrelin. And there's all these other things that create that can create chaos or harmony in the
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
Particularly, I work a lot with women in perimenopause and menopause. And so they're obviously coming to me and they're freaking out because they're gaining weight.
Yeah.
And they automatically think it's because of the shifts in their sex hormones.
Mm.
But a lot of times the weight gain in particular, I'm not talking about some of the other symptomology that can present with menopause or perimenopause, but some of the weight gain in particular, it's changes in cortisol and estrogen, or excuse me, cortisol and insulin. We become a little bit less insulin sensitive as we age.
Yeah.
As our ovarian hormones decline, we can tend to become a little bit more cortisol dominant. We don't handle stress as well. And so there's these shifts. And then if we're stressed all the time and we're not sleeping, now our appetite is off. So now we've got skewed leptin and ghrelin. And so it's not just I'm in menopause, like fix my sex
Of
hormones.
course.
There's all this other stuff that's
Going
going
on.
on too.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, what I see often too, and I'm sure you see the same thing, we all are accumulating burdens or stressors as we age. It's not so much the years of our life that leads to degradation on the body. It's the accumulation of stress over 20, 30, 40 years. That's
Yep.
the aging affects the degradation on our body. So of course, as women round that 40, 45-year-old corner, yes, hormones are declining, but let's think about everything else your body has picked up in 40 years,
Right.
20 years of birth control, excessive dieting, overtraining, PTSD and trauma from their first marriage. All these things have accumulated, and all of that's playing into it. And now they have gut dysfunction, which is also dysregulating them, causing them to eat less because they're so uncomfortable, which is another stressor. And
Yep.
we're all guilty of kind of digging our own holes at first because we don't know what's happening. And so we're just assuming I need to eat less and do more.
Yep. Yeah. And I think a lot of women, by the time they wind up reaching out to me, in perimenopause or menopause, they have almost no really good habits anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I always say like habits inform hormones too, in
Yeah.
the sense that like your
Yeah.
habits. So if you've not been taking care of yourself in your 20s or your 30s, you sort of start to reap the fruits of that come your 40s.
Bingo.
And so these women are going like, I'm not doing anything different, but I'm going, yeah, but you weren't doing the things you should have been doing like way back here.
Right.
There's your habits shape your menopause experience. And so much of what I find I wind up doing is just starting with the habits,
Sure.
starting with
Totally
the
agree.
really, really basics, because you have to really lay a foundation before you do anything else. And then
Absolutely.
certainly, I mean, you hit the nail on the head too. You have, a woman who has spent her lifetime on birth control, probably also put on an SSRI because she was on birth control.
Yeah.
So now she's got, she has spent her entire life not producing her own hormones.
Right.
She's on an SSRI or two, or, she's
Yeah.
on
Yeah. You name it.
Celexa or Wellbutrin or
Right.
something like that.
Right.
And now she's, going through menopause, and there's just so much dysregulation.
Yeah.
There's just so much
Yeah.
hormonal
Yeah.
mess.
It's crazy. It's crazy when you see when your eyes are open to the business model, not the healthcare model. Once your eyes open up to the business model, you're like, oh, she went from one medication to six medications in over 20 years. How about that?
which
It's,
makes you like a cash cow for
yeah,
the medical community. And I think that's, anytime I have talked about birth control, and I've talked about it numerous times, I always like to sort of tread lightly at first and just preface by saying, like, I do understand that taking birth control is a personal decision, and that
of
there are
course.
some women who are going to want to use it. And this is not like, when I talk about it, I don't want to talk about it in such a way that I'm like poo-pooing on it or
Yeah,
causing any woman to feel some kind of way.
yeah,
But at the same time, I think we need to sit back and realize that the majority of women start taking birth control in their teenage years,
yeah,
and they stay on it their
For
whole
decades.
life,
Yeah.
maybe with the exception of coming off of it for the express purposes of trying to have a family.
Yeah.
And so Victoria Felcar, I don't know if you follow her at all or if you, okay. So I adore her. But she and I have chatted, and she brings up such a valid point, which is that the system, the hormonal system in women is still in its infancy when it's starting to work in puberty. Puberty is supposed to be awkward and transitional, and the system's a little wonky, and so your periods aren't quite right, and you might
Right.
have like some symptomology. And instead of just letting the system even itself out, educating women, hey, the first couple years of menstruation are probably going to be a little weird, awkward. You might have some heavy periods, long periods, cramping, like
Mm.
PMS symptoms. We just march them into the doctor and go, her cycle's not regular. And the doctor says, take hormonal birth control.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, what 14-year-old girl, at least I know I wouldn't have, is going to say, hey, I have questions about this.
Of course. No.
What are the long-term side effects?
Yeah.
How long can I stay on this?
Yeah.
Could you please
I
walk me through the
completely agree.
potential? No young girl is going to know to say that. I
No,
don't
and
think that
quite
that's
honestly,
realistic.
neither is their mother. That
Right.
no one knows. And to that point, if they were asked, the physician can't even answer it. Let's be
Really?
honest. The physician
Yeah.
doesn't even know the true side effects. The physician can't even answer the mechanism of action of how the drug is working. You know,
You'll have doctors telling, or at least I had one woman tell me that her doctor told her that progesterone was in her birth control. I'm like, no, that's progestin, and it's
and
not the
yeah,
same thing.
yeah.
But I think therein lies my biggest beef with the whole birth control ordeal is that
Yeah.
there's a lack of informed consent and there's a lack
Yes.
of education. Like,
Yes. This is exactly what I've said. I've said the exact same thing to every single person I've ever talked to. It's not a matter of so much demonizing birth control or women's choices to use birth
mhm,
control. It's the fact that there has truly been zero education, and women are thinking they're making informed decisions, but it's actually the quite opposite. They are making the most uninformed decisions of their lives and have no idea in 20 years what that's going to mean for them. And
yeah,
that's never a discussion because honestly, that would probably be one of the largest lawsuits ever to happen in big pharma history. Was if the entire female, you know, uh, uh, American citizens were just like, wait a minute, there needs to be, discussions around this and recourse for all this misinformation. Um, and that
yeah.
just never happens.
And I think too, there's even a flaw in, I mean, there you would be maybe you wouldn't be shocked. How many women don't even know about their cycle?
Yeah.
Like they
Oh yeah.
genuinely, and I'm going to raise my hand here myself and say for the majority of my life, I was unaware that I needed to ovulate to produce hormones. Like it
Mm-mm.
was nobody had ever told me.
Yeah.
Like my period was just a pain when I was a kid. It
Yes.
was an inconvenience. I didn't understand that it is a
Uh,
marker of health, that it's a
yeah.
reflection of health. I didn't understand that, hey, you need to ovulate to make hormones. And by
Right.
the way, you need those hormones for a million and one other things other than just to create a baby.
Totally.
Like to say that, I mean, Lara Bryden has said this, and I have repeated this. I love this. I would put it on a t-shirt, which is to say that women don't need their sex hormones for anything else other than reproduction would be like saying men don't need testosterone for anything other than
Yeah.
reproduction. We
Which
would
is why
never
there's no
think,
male birth control.
correct, we would never think of just suppressing a man's testosterone
How
because
crazy.
that would have systemic far-reaching effects on his health and his physiology.
Yeah.
But
Right.
we have no issue
Right.
completely suppressing ovulation in women,
Right.
and then we don't think, oh, might that have systemic far-reaching effects on her physiology? Might
Yeah.
that change her mood? Might that diminish her libido? Might that impact her gut? Might that impact her cortisol and her thyroid? Like, might it cause nutrient deficiencies,
Yeah.
which we all know oral contraceptive pill does?
Right.
Um, and
Even
then,
long term, estrogen related cancers, neurological disorders without the presence of estrogen, Alzheimer's, dementia. These aren't things that a
osteoporosis, like you're not.
25-year-old are worried about, but when you turn 50, you're going to be worried about.
Yep. Yeah, and just the consequences of not producing your own hormones.
Yeah,
Like synthetic hormones they're just not the same. Any
totally.
doctor who says otherwise is not telling you the truth.
Totally.
Um, but yeah, so I'm with you there.
So that kind of leads to my next question, and we may have already answered it, but I'm going to still give you a chance in case you have some other thoughts. What
Mhm.
is, in your opinion, one of the biggest major problems we face in regards to women's health in American healthcare?
Um, I mean, I definitely do think the birth control thing is an issue. I really do. But again, I think it goes even further back to just there's no educating women about their cycle. There
I
just
agree.
isn't.
I
If
agree.
I think back, how old are you?
I'm 37.
Okay, so you're almost my age. So I'm 40. So I think back to like when I was a kid and the
Yeah.
school nurse like pulled you aside and they put the boys in one room and the girls in one room and like girls got pads and tampons and we were told we were going to get like a period, but like that was it.
Yeah.
Nobody gave me any other education other than that. I mean, I have adult women older than me that I coach, and I will say, you need to have your labs drawn in your luteal phase, and they go, "What's my luteal phase?"
Yep.
Like women just aren't even educated about their own bodies and about the things that happen to our bodies. And so
Yeah.
I think that because we aren't educated, we don't even know to ask the questions.
Sure.
We don't even know. And so I think that that's definitely um, one
I,
issue. And
I would agree with that.
I do have a bug in my butt about putting women on birth control to regulate their cycle. Um, and
Regulate.
yes, we can use air quotes there because you went to FDN, root cause.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, giving a drug, because that's what it is. Birth control is a drug. It is a pharmaceutical intervention. Giving a pharmaceutical intervention to suppress the system instead of addressing the dysfunction in the system is just not good health care.
Sure.
Um, and I feel like, work with a lot of women who are coming to me and they have gut issues
Yeah.
and they have mood imbalances
Yeah.
and they're on SSRIs or they're taking, Wellbutrin and they don't have a good libido and they
Yeah.
have vaginal dryness and they can't achieve an orgasm and they've got, gas and bloating and they've got like 50 million symptoms. And then once I dig into their intake, it's like, I've been on birth control for 22 years.
Yeah.
Well, that might be it
That
right
that
there.
might
Yeah.
certainly not helping. Well, and I'll take it a step further, and we may not fully agree on this, but I do agree with the education piece and the fact that women need to be more educated. But to take that a step further, how do you feel about the current medical professionals' education around women's health? I feel like even the OBGYNs, the endocrinologists, I have yet to meet someone that I'm truly impressed with from Western medicine in regards to their understanding of the differences between male physiology and women's physiology. And
Yeah.
it just seems like the entire education is designed around common symptoms women face, not root cause of common symptoms women face. You know what I mean?
There, yeah, I think,
Like PCOS is just so over diagnosed and misdiagnosed.
yeah, I think, conventional, traditional, however you want to verbalize it, medicine in this country they're schooled in silos and they
Yeah.
think in silos.
Yeah.
And so they don't see the body as a unit the
As a
same way
whole.
that the functional space does.
Yeah.
So I think that's one flaw. The
Agree.
second flaw is I think that conventional medicine is taught to diagnose and prescribe.
Yep.
So for them to deal with you, so to speak, you have to present with a disease
Right.
for them to care. And so and again, if you even think about blood work, right, you have these ranges that are ridiculously high. Okay.
Yep.
So like I just read some woman's labs the other day, and the range for testosterone was a point 0.1 to a 45.
Oh my
I'm
God.
going point 0.1 testosterone. She can feel like shit.
Yeah.
But so you're looking at these ranges, but you're realizing that for her to be addressed through conventional medicine, she would have to be all the way here or all the way here. But what about all of this in here? And so I think that we have to understand that conventional medicine is really great for acute care.
Yeah.
You break a bone, you need a doctor. You don't want a functional health practitioner. Your appendix ruptures, like you're having a heart attack, like
Yeah.
conventional medicine is brilliant.
Yeah.
But
Acute,
for
acute
but
injury.
for anything in that messy gray muddy middle that's going to require them to
Yeah.
actually think about the systems of the body in a cohesive way, you're in the wrong place and you need the functional space, because I think that's where functional medicine just really shines.
Absolutely agree with you.
I just don't think they have I don't want to say I think, I know they just don't have the education. They're
Yeah.
not even given basic nutritional
No.
education in med school. I have spoken to several doctors. I
Oh,
have
we can
doctors
just
who are
tell you,
clients.
you walk into a hospital and everyone's in worse shape than us.
I
That's
have
all we need to know. Everyone is in worse shape, you
I
know?
know I have a client who's a nurse practitioner, and she said to me the other day, she's like, you know more about this than I do.
Yeah.
And I don't have necessarily the fix it answer for that. I just feel like it is a shame, because at the end of the day, because of the way insurance is set up and because insurance covers the cost of conventional medicine versus functional medicine, most people are going to go through the conventional medicine system,
Yes.
and they're going to just unfortunately not be taken care of properly, probably.
Yeah.
And then they wind up seeing you, or they wind up coming to me, or
Yeah.
something like that. I mean, case in point, you just said you had mentioned that you had yet to see like an OBGYN or anybody who was like worth their salt. So I mentioned I lost my period for 12 years. It came back in 2022. And in 2023, January, I went to the gynecologist for the first time in like years. And she was like, so that, now that you're cycling, you could get pregnant. And I said, yes, I'm aware. She said, great. I think we should do birth control.
Wah,
And
wah.
I went, woman, I just told you I didn't have a cycle for 12 years. My body's finally producing hormones, and you want to put me on birth control? I'm sitting there and I'm like,
Crazy.
no, thank you. I mean, I just said no, thank you. And I was just like, run my pap smear and send me home.
Yeah.
But it blew my mind,
Yeah.
because I'm like, if I didn't know what I knew, and I was just somebody who didn't have knowledge of, I might
Yeah.
be like, oh, okay, like, why should I take birth control? And then there I go again, and I'm just suppressing the system all over again. And
Yep.
it's like, ugh.
Totally.
So,
For our listeners, can you go into the primary, this could be a deep dive. So the primary effects that hormonal birth control has on the body, and then let's kind of dive into the quote unquote non-hormonal birth control options too, because there's so much confusion and
yeah.
misleading information in that category. But if you don't mind, for our listeners, just helping women understand exactly what oral contraceptives or even an IUD is doing.
Yeah, so the IUD I think is easier to go through, because it doesn't, it's fairly cut and dry. I mean, so Paragard is the most popular one. It's that
Yeah.
copper IUD or whatever. And the main difference is that you will still ovulate with an IUD.
Mhm.
So in that sense, it's not suppressing the system. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the IUD doesn't come with, again, some side effects. So, right, there's an effect for everything that we put into our body. And so I think, we have to realize that it can make your periods a lot heavier.
Mm.
Heavy bleeding is super, super common. And the one thing that I notice is the impact that it has on the vaginal microbiome
Yes.
and the link that it has to bacterial vaginosis. So
Yeah.
just yeast infections,
Yeah.
right? Just like vaginal discharge,
Yeah.
itching, burning, lots of discomfort. Um, it keeps the vagina really, really acidic.
Mm.
And it just creates sort of like this breeding ground,
Mhm.
so to speak, for bacteria. And so those were probably the major issues I see with that. Apart from that, you're not going to get as many of the side effects that you're going to get from the oral contraceptive pill.
Sure. Now, in your
Which,
experience, well, I'll say this. In my experience, because of how copper interacts with other, metals and hormones in the body, the most of the women that I encounter on the copper IUD do have cycles, but they technically still have quite low progesterone levels. And
yeah,
even at the clinic, I've encountered, well, not at our clinic, but at other clinics coming to
mm,
us, I've encountered women taking progesterone HRT with the copper IUD, and the copper
okay,
prevented the progesterone
yes,
HRT from optimizing their levels.
yeah.
So they were kind of shooting themselves in the foot, paying all this money for HRT and not getting any of the benefits. And as soon as they pulled that copper IUD, progesterone went
Yep.
from 0 to 11, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, because with HRT, I always say it's not a panacea. Because it's not just about taking the hormone that you're deficient in, it's also about the environment that you're putting said hormone into.
Mm.
I've had clients come to me on HRT not feeling any better, and it's because they've had gut issues.
Yeah, of course.
Right. They've had these, which I always use the analogy of like seeds. If you're throwing seeds onto hard, dry earth, do you expect to get a result from that?
Good
Probably
point.
not. Now, what happens if you throw those seeds onto a fertile, moist soil? Like, oh, now we've got like an entire garden.
Yeah,
I always say if you just throw hormones into your bodily environment and it's not conducive to receiving those hormones
yeah.
and putting them to use, like you're going to have a problem. And I love that you mentioned copper because nutrient depletions are, I think, and nutrient balances are one of the major issues with the oral contraceptive pill.
Mhm.
The insane amount of nutrient depletion that happens. And, I did a podcast on birth control like last year. And when I was doing reading and research for it, I read and I was like, oh my gosh, this is just insane that the WHO actually, like the World Health Organization, actually recommends in literature, it has it written out that doctors who prescribe birth control should run nutrient panels on their female clients to check for nutrient depletions.
Oh,
What OBGYN that you know of
zero.
runs nutrient panels on every woman that they prescribe birth control to check for nutrient depletions?
Nada.
None that I know of.
Yeah,
Because when you look at the effects of the oral contraceptive pill, I think you can trace a lot of them back to nutrient depletions because your body is simply not getting the nutrients that it needs.
sure.
You see women depleted in B vitamins, you see women depleted in, certain trace minerals and nutrients and things that they need. And, your body requires those
Yeah,
for everything,
totally.
you know, for neurotransmitter production like, oh, and
Those
then
are
we wonder
mental
why
health.
this woman has a mood imbalance and is
Right,
on an SSRI, right?
right,
Like maybe because she was on birth control and it
right,
was depleting her serotonin,
right.
you know? So yeah, everything is connected.
Totally.
And again, that goes back to exactly what you said, which is just, that conventional medicine just it doesn't have that integrative
Yeah,
view of
yeah,
the human body. So if they're giving birth control, they're only thinking about, ovarian function. They're
yep,
not thinking about the way that that drug affects everything else.
totally. Now, and you brought up, gut health and how HRT technically may not be the solution a patient expects, and um, we run through that all the time at the clinic. We actually, and people are always surprised about this because when you think about brick and mortar clinics, it's about sell, sell, sell. It's about profits.
Mhm.
But people come to us surprised that a lot of times we meet with women or men and say, we don't actually think you're in a place of needing prescription HRT yet. We're seeing other red flags, whether that's through their medical form or just directly on their lab work, showing their cortisol is through the roof, GI dysfunction is off, detox pathways are off. And so to that point, okay, we put a woman on progesterone therapy, but her cortisol is twice too high and her gut is
Mhm.
off. The gut can't metabolize that progesterone properly. And even if it did, the woman's stress is so high that progesterone is just converting to cortisol. And that's oftentimes why women see bad results from progesterone. It's because it converted to cortisol. Now you're retaining water. Now you're more anxious. Now your sleep is messed up. The,
Yep.
the actual problem didn't get resolved. And in many cases, if you address the stress and fix the gut, assuming she's, under 45 years old or under 40 years old, those hormones could very well come back in a couple
Yeah.
in 3 to 6 months time, maybe a little bit longer for some, but depending on the individual. So there's quite often that we're convincing people to dive into the functional side, hold off on HRT treatment, give it 3 to 4 months, retest, and then make better decisions from there. And just like what you said, maybe they still do need HRT. But had we not done that, the HRT wouldn't have worked. And we see the
Yeah.
same thing with men. Men will come to us from other clinics blasting testosterone, and their levels are, compared to their dosage, I would say subpar. And that's
Okay.
kind of my first inclination that your body's not metabolizing this effectively.
Yeah.
We dive into addressing their gut, and sometimes they have no symptoms, but we dive in anyways. They have a bunch of stuff going on, fix their gut. All of a sudden, that 700 testosterone is now 1200 testosterone, and we haven't even touched their dosage. All we did was optimize that pathway.
Yeah. Cellular sensitivity, like cellular receptivity, like your body has to be able to receive those hormones,
Yeah,
and put them to use. And I think you made such a good point in what you just said. And it's really a credit to you because I don't know many HRT clinics that are like, hey, I think we might need to stop the HRT.
yeah,
But you said, wait 3 to 4 months. People are so impatient.
yes.
People are just
We
very
want solutions
impatient.
now.
Yeah, they want results like in that exact moment. I did my last show in 2019 and I knew in November of 2019 and I knew I was going to take time off to focus on health. Like I knew my health was a mess and I knew I wanted to get my period back. And when people ask me, what did you do to get your period back after 12 years? I literally said I was patient. I was just
Great
patient.
answer.
Like, and I know that it's the unsexy answer.
Yeah,
And there's other things that I did along the way, right? Like, yes, I managed but just even the mental stress, and again, Victoria Falco, like, hate to mention her again, but she talks about how when you compete and you're hyper fixated on how you look all the time and you're
yes.
constantly just like it's a stressor that
Yeah,
alone can zap your period
totally.
like right out the door. And
Totally.
so it's not that I gained a crap load of weight or a ton of fat or I had to eat 3,000 calories to get my period back. I needed to chill out,
Yeah.
just let the stress go away, and then I needed to be patient and let my body's system
Yes.
pick
Calm
back
down.
up.
Yeah.
And when my period came back in 2022, I had 3 periods that year. That was it. But I was thrilled because it was three. 2023, I had 6 periods. Now, every month, this so far in 2024, every 30 to 33 days, like clockwork. So
Awesome.
But my point is when I talk about that with women, I'm like, you have to just give it
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
There is an element of patience to this, which I feel like in today's society, we're very instantly gratified and it's lacking. So when somebody says, and it's the same with the women I work with, when they're coming to me in perimenopause and menopause and they're freaking out and they've got all these symptoms, and I'm looking at their diet and I'm going, oh my God, like I can't even, I have to correct the habits and the lifestyle and the diet. And we have to build a foundation first so that if you do go the HRT route, that HRT goes into an environment with a good foundation, with habits in place, right? Like I'm not sending you to a clinic and you're paying all this money
Right.
for hormone replacement therapy, but you're still stressed, you're still eating like crap, you don't get enough protein, you
Right.
don't sleep well, all of these things. So I'm explaining this to them and it's the most unsexy sell,
Yeah.
right?
It is.
Like
Yeah.
like, oh, we need to work on eating balanced meals 3 times a day, like
Right.
adults, like stop grazing all day. You're not a cow,
Right.
like that kind of thing. And so I do think there's just it. I loved what you said about, let's give it 3 to 4 months, meaning
Yeah.
let's try these interventions and then be patient and
Yes.
see. And then we go from there. There's just this lack of patience.
There is. And I'll one of the biggest things that I've tried to do over the years, and I feel that's helped tremendously, is really hone in on a layman's explanation so that the patient can really grasp the why. Because that's, by the time they come to us, they've seen 5+ people. No one's given them validation for their symptoms, and no one's given them answers. So one of the things that I break down to just about every single person I talk to is that the human body wasn't made for 2024. It's made for
No.
caveman times. So the way our body perceives stressors and the way we perceive stress in this crazy modern day life is very, very different. And in a woman's body, we can make a lot of arguments in the modern day, but originally, back in thousands of years ago, the primary purpose of a woman's body was procreation. And that's
Yes.
how a woman's body thinks.
Yeah.
So everything that the body does, adaptations, actions, is all in regards to fertility and procreation.
Producing.
So as stress accumulates, the body says, right now is not an opportune time to have babies. We need to shift focus from fertility and move into survival mode. And 85% of women are stuck in survival mode for
All the
various
time.
reasons. For various reasons. One of the things that I think has really affected it is honestly women entering the workforce and trying to be high performance CEOs the same level as men. Not saying that it can't be done, but it can't be done like men because the
Oh,
adrenal
Matt, you're opening a whole
sensitivity.
big can of worms.
I know.
You're like opening the Pandora's box.
I
No, I'm
am.
here for it. I love everything you're saying. Keep going.
The adrenal sensitivity between men and women is so different. Men can get
Hmm.
away with 6 hours of sleep every single night and maybe
Yep.
missing a meal, missing some water,
Not women.
overtraining and stuff. All of those things women cannot do. And
Correct.
so their performance just continues to decline and they just keep pushing themselves because they're trying to keep up with what society has set this inappropriate standard of. And
Mhm.
by no means do I want to make it seem like women are incapable. It's just it's going back to the knowledge piece, understanding thresholds and limits and
Mhm.
what your body needs to perform. And that's I think what's truly lacking. I always try to explain this to women. It's not singular stressors. It's not just that divorce. It's not
It's
just
cumulative.
that prep. It's accumulation. And for some, it's way worse than others. Maybe they have a gene mutation and
Yep.
they got Lyme disease at 6 years old and they
Right.
started developing gut issues and they got on birth control. And it's just this,
And they did like multiple rounds of antibiotics or
yes,
like, all of these
it's just
things.
an
Yeah.
accumulation. And now they're 30 and they are super fucked up.
Yeah.
And they need someone like us to unpack all of that for them.
Walk it backwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Step by step. Yeah. And I mean, all I can do is say, like, everything that you said, I just was like in my head, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Like I'm having like those yes moments. Um, because women have, I think, unfortunately been sold a lie that we can and should be able to do all things and be all things to all people at all times. So
Yes.
you have these women in, by the time they reach their 40s and their 50s, and they're working full time, and they're moms, and they
Yep.
have husbands,
Yep.
and they're taking care of a house, and they have aging parents. And so you're adding all these things up, and then you have them doing things like cutting calories, doing keto, trying to
CrossFit,
fast,
spin
right, taking
class.
CrossFit 3 times a week, or Lord have mercy, even worse, going to Orange Theory on a daily basis,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
because they're trying to shrink the tire around their middle. And they're like this all the time.
All the
And
time.
honestly, like one of the first things that I try to do with the majority of my clients, apart from focusing on increasing the nutrient density of their diet, which is like one of my foundational pieces, is trying to help them regulate their nervous system
Yes.
and just trying to help them find ways, even if they're small ways, of finding pockets of peace in their day
Yeah.
and building in, you know, when you go to pee at work for a bathroom break, breathe deeply on the toilet. Like
Zen
just
out.
take some deep inhales and exhales, right? Like get sunlight in the morning, turn your phone off an hour before bed, like trying to get them to just create these, micro habits throughout the course of the day that pull back even in some very small way on that constant operation in fight or flight.
Yes.
Because they're literally running in sympathetic nervous system function all day long,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
every day of their life for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it's exactly what you said. It's not a ding on women. It's an acknowledgement that God created men and women's physiologies to be different and to serve different purposes.
Yes.
And so women do tend to be a little less stress resilient and a little more stress responsive
Yes.
than men. And that's not bad or good. It's just a difference that we have to honor.
Yes.
I love that you
I like
mentioned.
that you said honor. I like that. It's a difference we have to honor.
Yeah, I love that you said too, you mentioned about like adrenals and everything like that, because, you know, even though men can technically sleep less than women, I know far more women who are sleeping a lot less than men.
Oh
I
yeah.
have women
Oh yeah.
women coming to me in their 40s and 50s and they're sleeping 6 hours a night. And I'm like, how are you functioning?
Right.
But
Are you okay?
especially as we get older
Yes.
and we need our adrenals for the little hormone that we have left,
Right.
because as our ovaries start to produce less, because I think women forget or they even don't know that we do produce some of our sex hormone from our adrenals, from DHEA, from that parent hormone. So, you really want good, strong adrenals as you get older, because that's going to, again, go back to what we mentioned earlier, like shaping that menopause experience. It's going to
Yeah.
make a better menopause experience. And one of the simplest things you can do is just get freaking sleep. I start to tell people, my clients, like, I want you to be as obsessed with your sleep as you are with what fat burner do I need, what diet should I
Yeah.
do,
My
and what
training program.
exercise should
Yeah.
I be doing.
Totally.
Like obsess about your sleep to that degree, because if you can start to sleep better, all that, it's like knocking a domino over, right? There's just this systemic positive effect
Yes.
on the body if you just start to say, you know what, I need probably 8, maybe 9 hours
Yeah.
of sleep a night.
Yeah.
Women are like, what? And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm 40 and I sleep 8 to 9 hours a night.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
mean, my fiance Erin has, she's been through the ringer with uh, trauma, birth control,
mhm.
competitive women's physique,
Oh
the
boy.
the the whole shebang.
Okay.
Um, she really struggles at anything less than 8.5 hours.
Yeah.
And even to this day, she's, healed significantly from the past, but running a couple different businesses keeps us pretty stressed. And so she
Yep.
needs that 9 hour mark to truly be her best self.
Yeah, when I was younger, I really did not place much value on sleep at all. I also don't think the discussion was being had in the fitness
No,
space about that,
no.
and there wasn't social media like this. So there just wasn't the knowledge. So in my 20s, I shudder to think about how little I slept. But in my 30s, I started really prioritizing it. And I can single-handedly say it made a world of difference. And I mean, when I say prioritizing it, and this is what I talk about with my clients too, I'm not just talking about actually creating that box of time to sleep. I'm talking about what do you do in the hours leading up to bed and what do you do when you get up in the morning as well? Like, what is your sleep hygiene like
I love
surrounding
it.
that time? So,
Yeah.
like, the literally 2 hours before bed, I'm already like turning off my phone. I'm
Yes.
putting it on
Winding
silent.
down.
It's upside down.
Yeah.
Like I'm having, my husband and I have probably finished having dinner. We're winding down on the couch together. I'm not working.
Right.
I'm not doing things. The lights are dim in the house. Like I'm not, and just being mindful of those types of things
Yeah.
because our bodies operate on circadian rhythms that work with the sun. And with
Right.
all of the artificial light in our lives and the
Right.
way that our lives are, there's so much disruption and dysregulation that can occur.
Yes.
So, being really protective about the time and what you do before you go to bed, but then also when you get up in the morning.
Mhm.
I always tell my clients, don't get on your phone right away.
Yeah. Jump
You
right
know,
on it.
don't get up and jump right on it right away. Pee, do your thing, go outside if you can, get some sunlight in your eyes. If it's dark outside, I always recommend a happy light,
Mm.
which is what I have because I'm up very early in the morning because my husband works early. And just stand in front of it
Yeah.
for a minute or two and just look at it and get that, it mimics the sun and just
Yeah.
get that exposure. So it's talking to your cortisol awakening response, right? We're getting that good response and then start to go about your day.
Absolutely.
Blue light blockers are phenomenal. But just being really mindful of not just creating that 8 to 9 hours to sleep, but then also starting to think about like, hey, I don't have to run myself up to the very last minute of the day every
Oh,
single day
totally.
and then lay down and expect my brain to just shut off like that.
Right. Instantaneous.
The brain can't go from 100 to zero in a
Right.
second.
Right.
So a lot of times when women say, I can't fall asleep, I have busy brain, I'm always going, talk to me about what you do right before you go to bed. Let's
Yep.
start there.
Yep.
Before you go trying to take the ashwagandha and the melatonin and the everything else, what are you doing right before you go to sleep? Is it
Yeah.
something that can be corrected with just a simple lifestyle tweak?
Yeah.
You know,
Totally. And we're on the same page there. Obviously, helping people optimize their health is always multifactorial, but
yes.
like you've emphasized a few different times, the low-hanging fruit foundational items are non-negotiables. And
Oh,
so,
yeah.
when the people bring up that their mind is racing at night and they have difficulty falling asleep, all the tactics you brought up, unplugging a couple hours, dimming the lights, maybe doing a hot bath or a hot shower to help you wind down that heat exposure.
Yep.
Um, Another big one, if they specifically say, my mind is racing and stuff like that, journal a to-do list, get it out of your mind, purge those
Brain dump.
thoughts,
Yes.
go to bed with an empty mind,
I say that yep. I recommend journaling a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mentor coaches and I was just saying to my mentee last night, I said, even the most complex cases sometimes can be distilled into the simplest solutions.
Totally.
Um, you know, and I did a podcast several months ago and she was asking me about how I test with the GI map and when I test with the GI map. And I said, look, I said, sometimes I have clients who come to me with gut issues and I don't
Yeah.
recommend a GI map because if I look at their intake and I see that their stress is through the roof or their diet is a mess, they don't eat on a regular schedule, maybe they eat really rushed, right? If I see all of these opportunities for me to work there, I always think to myself, if I can correct the bloating or the constipation or the diarrhea or the reflux or whatever symptom it is that they're experiencing without charging them for the $300-400 test, let's
Big
do
win.
that, right?
Yeah,
Why would
big
I use
win.
a chainsaw if I
Right.
could get the job done with a butter knife?
Totally.
Like, so just starting with the foundations and layering that in. And then if we get to a place where I'm like, okay, now maybe we need to test because we're still not seeing results,
Mhm.
or you've still got vasomotor symptoms. Okay, let's refer to the HRT clinic, and then you start to do those things. But if
Yeah,
you can get it done with just changing diet and lifestyle, like I'm all for that. Just
absolutely.
the
Yeah.
easiest low-hanging fruits, because those are often the root causes, you
Yes.
know.
100%
I
agree.
mean, the root causes, when you talk about even with gut issues, and you run a GI map and you see what's going on and you see the dysbiosis and you think to yourself though, okay, but that's still just something signaling that something caused that.
Yep.
What caused that, right? Like you get
Yeah.
somebody on a healing protocol and they're not getting any better because they're still stressed out of their mind.
Yep.
You haven't dealt with the stress piece.
Right. Is
So,
the gut issues the root, or is it actually just
mhm,
another symptom coming
mhm,
from the root? You know,
yep,
which
yeah.
brings me to my next question. In your opinion, why do you think poor gut health is so common in America in the modern world?
Oh, I think a bunch of reasons. Antibiotic overuse for one. And I say that I don't want to, again, I don't want to impugn on the use of antibiotics, but for God's sakes, they're handed out like chiclets.
Yeah,
Like,
overuse.
I mean, I have clients who are like, I had a sinus infection, antibiotics. Oh, I had like the flu, antibiotics. It's like it's for
Right,
everything.
right.
So antibiotics definitely. Also, just stress. We are a
Yeah,
very stressed out American society, and that's
yeah.
not something that you see necessarily in other cultures.
Sure.
Um, we treat, I mean, even I was having this conversation the other day with a friend of mine, how we treat eating as an act of inconvenience. Like I have clients who will say to me, I don't have time to eat.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm like, I'm like, oh my God, we're that rushed now as a society that we don't have
Yes.
time to eat, so
Yes.
the stress piece,
Yes.
because
We're all
it's not that
overworked.
it,
We're
yep,
underfed. We're reliant on stimulants.
yep,
Team no
we're,
sleep.
yeah, we're undernourished too. I
Yeah.
say that a lot, and I do think that's a contributory cause to gut issues as well, in the sense that we eat, we might be adequately fed on calories, but we're not necessarily adequately fed on nutrients.
Yeah. Agreed.
The gut isn't getting the fibers and the
Yep.
polyphenols and the antioxidants and the things that it needs to really establish a robust and resilient microbiome.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think people eat enough healthy food variety.
Yeah.
There's really no consensus as to what constitutes a healthy microbiome, except for the fact that we know the most diverse microbiomes are the healthiest and the most resilient and the most robust. And you create the most diversity in gut microbiota through diet diversity.
Yep.
So I think that that's a huge piece as well. You get somebody who eats like the same vegetable every day for like
Yeah.
all eons of time, and
Right.
instead of like swapping it out, right? Eating the rainbow, simple things like that. So I think stress, I think poor diet, I think quality of nutrition too. And I'm going a little off the beaten path here, but my dad was the CEO of Rodale Institute for the majority of his life, which is the country's leading expert on organics.
Mhm.
And they have run some of the longest studies on organic produce and organic fruits and vegetables and regenerative agriculture and soil and things like that. And so I think just the decline in food quality, I'm very
Mhm.
aware of that, like
Yeah.
how our food is grown.
Yeah.
Like the tomato that comes out of the ground now is less nutrient dense than the tomato that came out of the ground like 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
So you have to eat like 10 tomatoes to get the same
Yeah.
amount of nutrients that you could have pulled from the tomato,
Yeah.
several years ago. So again,
Not to
antibiotics,
mention toxic exposure,
yes.
the
Hmm.
pesticides, the heavy metals in our water, our air
Plastics,
quality, plastics in everything we wear, everything we eat, everything. We are
yep.
just all embodied with plastics. And what I always explain to people is that is technically a stress. And so when
On
we
the
use the
system.
term stress, we're talking about all these different burdens on your body, some of which they have no idea about. How would you know that you have a toxic burden unless someone
Hmm.
like us highlighted it? You
Hmm.
know, there's no way of truly knowing. You might know that something's wrong. You have severe metabolic dysfunction, autoimmune disease, skin issues, but beyond that, you don't know, oh, this is definitely, toxic burden from glyphosate. Like no one can
Yeah.
pinpoint that.
Yeah. Because there's a difference between perceived stress and unperceived stress.
Yes,
I even think it's difficult as a coach to assess the amount of stress in someone's life sometimes because
I agree.
you ask questions around stress, but in all truth, they're so used to being stressed that it's the norm for them.
Yep.
They don't, they don't perceive themselves as stressed anymore. They're just so used to it.
Yep.
Um, and so I see that too. But yeah, like, antibiotics, poor diet, the decline in how our nutrition is produced, toxic burden, like you said, chronic stress. The exercise piece definitely plays a role. People who are sedentary, right? We're way too sedentary as a society. But then I also see the flip side, at least in the subset of people that I coach, which is people exercise too much.
Overtrain. Yeah.
They're overtraining, right? The majority. I always say, give me the client who sits on their butt and overeats. That is the easy fix, right? But
Very
instead,
true.
I get, you know, Sally exercise a lot who does
Yeah.
Orange Theory and boot camp and runs and eats, a
And
mozzarella stick and
yeah,
a collagen
fast.
coffee.
18
Right.
hour fast every day.
Yeah, like something ridiculous like that. And is training fasted yet too at the
Yeah,
age of
yeah,
like 45.
yeah,
So the majority of the women I coach, they are eating a poor diet,
yeah.
but they're also not eating enough. So they're underfed, but they're also undernourished. So there's like this diet quality piece, but also the calorie amount. I mean, when I start to feed some of my clients, they're like, I can't eat all this. This is too much food.
Absolutely. Get that a
I
lot.
hear, do you? Okay, good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I get that all the time. Like, I'm too full. I can't. It looks like too much food. I'm going to get fat eating this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sweetheart, nobody got fat from raspberries and
Right.
grass-fed beef. Don't worry about it. Like,
Right.
you're totally okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, we're getting close to the finish line, Allison. Is there any topics or advice that you want to give the listeners as we kind of button this video up?
topic wise, no, I don't think so. Advice, oof, relative to what?
Um, Going along the same discussions we've talked about, key advice for women who want to prioritize their health but don't know where to start.
Oh, that's a good one. I always say start simple
Mhm.
and start with where you are.
Mhm.
Um, Small habits accumulated over time yield very big results.
Yes.
I think it's very easy to get, we have so much information available to us now.
Yes.
I actually feel very strongly for the majority of the population who doesn't know enough to sift through it and figure out what's right, what's wrong, what's true, what's false, and most of all, what's relevant to them. So
Yeah.
it becomes very easy to get so overwhelmed that you just go, like, I don't even know what to do. But I always say, like, you can never go wrong with just the basics,
Sure.
which is just eating more whole, single ingredient, nutrient dense foods. If you know you don't do that right now, it could be something as simple as I'm going to eat a piece of fruit with breakfast every day. Like start where you are and build on it.
Yes.
Don't necessarily feel that you need to overwhelm yourself. You can never go wrong with just simple habits like moving a little bit more,
Mm.
eating whole, single, nutrient dense foods, sleeping and making it a priority. Like,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
I'm a big pain in the butt with sleep. If I will be sharing this with my clients and they'll be listening to it going like, oh my God, Allie
Yeah.
is talking about sleep again. Because
Oh,
I'm
oh,
such a big
it'll be me
hammer.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, hammer about sleep. And strength training. I am a huge proponent of strength training for absolutely everybody. There's nobody I don't recommend it for.
Mm.
The degree to which you strength train and that's all different.
Yeah.
But I'm a huge fan of strength training. I definitely think one of the flaws, if there is one in the functional space, is that we don't talk enough about strength training
Yeah.
with our clients. I think there's, a lot of discussion, or like I think the exercise piece is just neglected a lot. But obviously, because of my background and my,
Yeah.
I'm a meathead at heart. Strength training, if you don't do anything else, strength train and walk.
Amen to
Like
that.
those two things.
Yeah. But don't strength train too much. Don't make it a 0 to 100 change. Slowly integrate yourself into more activity,
Yep.
like Allison said, and keep in mind that if you're not sleeping, how much benefit are you getting from that exercise or intense strength training? So it's
Yeah.
a balancing act of fueling, training, and recovery. And that is the balancing act that all of our bodies require, but especially women. Allison,
And
thank you
don't
so
train
much for this
fasted.
call. What's that?
I said, and if you're a woman, please don't strength train
Yeah,
fasted.
and don't train fasted. Absolutely. Um, Allison, please tell everyone where they can find you. If they're looking for assistance, how they can get a hold of you. Give us some
Sure.
details.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the owner of Revive Wellness Health and Physique. My website is revivewellness.health. I do basically the same offer now that I've been offering for the last 18 years, which is one-on-one coaching. It's the primary way that I work with my clients. I do also do lab consultations, so just one-off consultations. You can reach me through my website. I do free consultation calls for anybody who's interested. So if you want to talk to me, I want to talk to you. I have no problem taking the time to speak to anybody. And I am very active on Instagram. It's probably the platform I'm the most active on. And it's just my name, one word, at Allison Fahrenbach. My DMs are always open. You're welcome to contact me. And then my podcast is the Revive Wellness Podcast, and it's available on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, and wherever anybody gets their pods.
That is awesome. Well, great chatting with you today, Allison. I really appreciate you shedding light on these topics. And I honestly think we could talk all day. So we're definitely going to have to book another call and do a deep dive, maybe about more specifics of what we already talked about, or a whole new
Yeah.
topic that we're both pretty passionate about that we think could help others.
Yeah. Love the conversation, Matt. It was really great.
All right. Well, I hope you have a great day and we'll talk again soon.